Good morning, everybody. Here it is Monday morning, and we get a chance to get our dose of God's Word, to get our day and our week started off right. This morning, I want to look for a few moments at a passage way back yonder in the Old Testament, the book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy takes place before they go into the Promised Land. And what we have here in Deuteronomy chapter 10, Moses goes down, he starts to remind them, and he gives them some instructions. But there's some things that he says that are really timeless and that are still very applicable to us today. He says in Deuteronomy chapter 10 and in verse 17, again, he's talking to his people, he's talking to the children of Israel. He's going down through this big long list, this is what I've done for you, and so on and so forth. But he makes a couple of statements in here that I think are very relative to today. For he says in Deuteronomy 10 and in verse 16, he says, "Therefore, circumcise the foreskin of your heart and be stiff-necked no longer. For the Lord your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, the great God, mighty and awesome, who shows no partiality nor takes a bribe." Last week in one of our videos we talked about this concept, you do you and I'll do me kind of mindset. Me and God's got this deal worked out. I've got a relationship with Christ and all these types of things. But here's a timeless principle when it comes to God that I think it would do us very well to kind of take a step back, take a breath, and really think about these things. Notice what he says. He says, "Circumcise the foreskin of your heart and be stiff-necked no longer." In other words, he's saying, don't stop doing things your way. And when we look at our society today, and it's been the same way ever since the garden, is men want to do whatever it is their way, whether it's things concerning God, whether it's things of how they want to live, or whatever. You can just put any of those things in that space. But God says, don't do that. Get the cotton out of your ears and listen to what I'm saying to you. And be stiff-necked. That means not willing to yield, not willing to bend. Why? Why should we be very careful that we get the cotton out of our ears and begin to listen to God? That we are not so prideful and with the attitude of you do you and I'll do me, and me and God's got this deal worked out. God does not work out deals. God does not have individual standards for each and every individual, because he says something very profound in the very next verse. Why? Because he is God of gods. We are not God. God does not conform to us. We are to conform to him. He's God of gods and he is Lord of lords. That means he is master of all. He is master over you. You are not the master of yourself. You are not accountable to yourself. We are accountable to God. He says, the great God, mighty and awesome, who shows no partiality, nor takes a bribe. Here that would be the idea of showing no partiality. It's like, well, God's going to accept you the way that you want him to accept you, and he's going to accept me the way that I want him to accept me. No, that's being partial. God cannot be God and be partial. He cannot be God of gods and Lord of lords. He cannot be awesome and mighty if he shows partiality to each and every one of us. And he doesn't take a bribe. Bribes can come in a lot of different forms and fashions. It not necessarily has to be money. But here's this idea of taking a bribe. God, I'll believe in you, but you let me do what I want to do. That, in a sense, that would be taking. God would be being bribed by our acknowledge. So I'm going to acknowledge you, God, but just let me do what I want to do. That's bribing him. That's almost like God's begging us to give him the time of day. So here's this timeless principle that we need to really grasp and understand. We don't make our own standards. We don't make our own way. That is established and has been informed by God to us through His Word. So what do we need to do? We need to cease being stiff-necked and start listening to what God has said. Why? Because He is God of gods and He is Lord of lords. He is awesome. He is powerful. He is mighty. He doesn't take a bribe, and He doesn't work out deals. What we must do is we must conform to Him. He's not going to conform to us. He is the maker. He is the creator. He is judge, jury, and executioner, so to speak. So what's some powerful advice that Moses writes down and reminded the children of Israel back then, and it's still the same advice for you and I today as well. Let us stop being stiff-necked. Let us circumcise our heart and ears and get away from our pride and selfish desires and the way that we want to do things in whatever form or fashion that might be, and come back, humble ourselves, and learn of the things of God, God's way, God's will. Why? Because we can't bribe Him with words. And so there's your dose of God's Word. I hope it'll do you some good. Lord willing, we'll get back tomorrow and we'll get another dose to get our day started off right. Hope you all have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.